right.
Okay, the first question is.
So
We should have a buzzer.
I will. That would be awesome. Next time I do a tandem interview. Now I know. So just to give you a little background as to what this is. So I've been invited to curate a grant for an organization called Ablative Grass. That is a really new organization started in last year, 2011. And they're about supporting artists and organizations that are innovating beyond the gallery space. So very much, thinking along ideas that are about making art not only accessible, but really like it is a part of everyday life, and really kind of being able to transgress those boundaries that create this kind of hierarchies in terms of your access to or your experience with or your ability to think of yourself as an artist, kind of a thing. So they have already or very recently awarded their first round of organizational grants. And this process that we're engaged in now is about awarding their individual grants to artists. So it's a really, I've never been involved in, I've never curated a grant before. I didn't even know what that meant. So a large part of this is kind of figuring out what that is. And so there's a structure that exists in these three phases. And right now we're in the first phase, which is, me having nominated 20 artists, and I'm doing these, what I'm calling studio visits with artists to talk about the idea of social engagement and to try to see if there's a definition of such a thing. And, then if there is, how does that relate to audience and value, and where do you locate the art, and these questions that kind of come along with being involved in artistic practice, where you kind of have to confront certain paradigms, if you will. So how does social engagement shift, displace, transform those paradigms, if at all, So that is, in a nutshell, what it is that I'm doing and that we're doing, and what you have so graciously agreed to be a part of. The second phase will be determined based on criteria that is developed in this phase. So, doing these interviews and putting them online is all about opening up that conversation just beyond us to our networks, to whomever kind of stumbles onto the site and is thinking about creativity. Excuse me. And to bring an element of transparency to the grant making process that doesn't necessarily exist.
Right.
So, in addition to challenging what art is, it also wants to challenge the current philanthropical system, and then also, curatorial practice is implicated in there somewhere too. So that's the second thing is, kind of using the information generated through this process to develop this criteria that will be used in the selection. 10 artists will then be selected from the 20. And then there's this third phase where 4 artists are ultimately awarded. And then there's a culminating event that comes out of this, which will include all 20 artists. Excuse me. So,
do you want some water?
I would love some water.
Okay.
Thank you.
When you work with other people, you gain so much more, so that, and I think that this is obvious, like people who work with film, or who are directors, like they know that a good director has to be able to create this kind of ecosystem amongst the people that they're working with, so that whatever it is that they're looking for happens, right? And so I feel like it's that same type of structure that we wanted to emulate. It's like we have lots of different friends who are doing really interesting work, and they want to collaborate, and you want to collaborate with them because they're your friends, and they have interesting ideas. And I feel like for me and for us, I think that's part of what we really wanted to do with Sin Kabeza, was just kind of create, an official name that would be able to bring people together.
We try to the decolonization, we try to change the switch about hierarchy, about en construction, example, the video, who is the head.
Who's in charge, right?
I think every time we try to the funder example, in the last video we show in Germany, try to the funder other form the relationation to animal to human. You know, I think Sin Kabeza try to funder this part in colonization. You know, when people sing "I'm the best," you know, we try to break, you know, the hierarchy every time. And I think Sin Kabeza don't try to make art. You know, this is not the idea. You know, in the other project in Seed, you like talk about the Seed Bank. You know,
Seed Bank. Yeah, I can talk about Seed Bank. Well, we have like a bunch of projects that we've been doing recently, and the majority, or really all of them, have really been taking seriously what natural cultural inquiry is. And so what does that mean? It means that you can't separate ecology, you know, you can't separate nature from cultural analysis or cultural practice. And so we've been, you know, and when you talk about socially engaged, I think that for a lot of people, socially engaged means helping people, right? And I think that that's very important, you know, as a definition. But I would say that we have to expand sort of our conception of the social to involve a whole series of other things that are alive and around us that perhaps our traditional form of knowledge doesn't generally pay attention to. And for me, that's what, you know, I feel like that's what we're doing. So for example, the film that Cheto's talking about that we did recently, we have a couple of film projects that we've recently done. I don't know if they're film because it's digital movies, but, you know, moving image and, you know, audiovisual installation. But, you know, we had one project that was called Quiltro, which is translated roughly as like mutt or street dog. And it took place in Santiago de Chile. And we're also very much, the reason I said oral history before is because that's a lot of what we've done together is like interview people, talk to people, engage in conversation. And one of the things that we were really interested in doing in Chile, because it's so far away and we don't get there that often, is that we wanted to, you know, we had met a whole bunch of activists who were thinking about the relationship between themselves and their street dogs and the dogs that they had adopted, and what we thought were really effective, I mean, in terms of the type of emotive sensation that they were able to transmit with their stories. And so we went and we had, you know, this series of interviews with people who we thought would be interesting to talk to about street dogs in Chile, which are very much a part of quotidian life, right? And there's a population of over 1.5 million street dogs in Chile. Unlike here, you see street dogs all the time, right? So they're not hidden by shelters. I mean, there are shelters as well, but it's also very much part of everyday life to see street dogs and to interact with them. And so, you know, we talked to about 10 people, and from there we also culled and, you know, included about 5 different interviews with people who we thought were really taking that situated knowledge, taking that experience that they have and that language that they've developed with their dog or with their best friend or with their companion species. And, you know, we wanted to present that, and we wanted to make it possible for people to think not only, you know, like, to think across different kind of platforms, right? So that we wanted them to be able to think about, you know, how do you transmit feminism through a relationship you have with your dog? Like, is that possible? And, you know, we have some amazing interviews with people that show us that that is possible, you know, and with, you know, we followed the dogs themselves. We have a lot of like raw footage of dogs on the street. And I feel like it's this kind of peripheral vision that we're trying to build, you know, how do you focus on things that perhaps are there but that we don't see, and what are the colonial structures that make it possible for us not to see them? So for example, you know, like you see a street dog as ugly, right? Because we're taught that pedigreed dogs are the ones that are worthwhile, right? How does that have a racial discourse, right? How does that also have a gendered discourse? The idea that the bitch on the street is like the one that you have to eliminate because she's going to reproduce, you know, just sort of these, what we feel are really colonial mindsets that we replicate daily and that we don't think about. And so our work is really about trying to find these strategies through media to be able to decolonize those types of structures, right? The other project, I love your shirt. We're really dedicated right now to speculative fiction. I mean, when you talk to me about socially engaged art, I think about dreams. I feel like so much of what is wrong with our world is that it's like we can't dream up something different, or that those dreams aren't taken seriously. And I feel like I took a class with Angela Davis once, and she cited W.B. Du Bois, and I've never been able to actually find the citation, but he says that one of the most important things is to teach people to see the stars. And so I feel that speculative fiction, speculative feminism, these speculative practices are all about kind of like breaking open, like what could happen, what if,
right.
And so our recent projects have been really working with, science and speculative fiction. We have a project called Seed Bank. We have another project called Seed, Visual Escapes from the Future, where we pretend it's kind of like this fantasy that we're ethnographers that travel into the future, and like we record all these like performances and people with crazy costumes and settings that are arid, and wondering what it'll look like in the near future in a post-gender society, and including a whole series of different people who bring their performance practices, their music, their diverse strategies to the camera, right? And this is filmed together with 3 directors. Directors in charge of the camera more so, in charge of the editing process, and then with like a series of people that we wanted to work with. And we have another project called Seed Bank, which is actually really ambitious, I think, because we actually want to build like a nomadic site, like a nomadic architecture.
A physical site?
A physical site where we wanted to be nomadic. We wanted to be able to travel so that it's not going to be something that like is anchored to the ground permanently, but that could actually go to different sites. And the idea is to model it on bacteria. Why? Bacteria are actually really vital to our survival, right? So that the bacteria we have in our gut, for example, are vital to the fact that we're able to sit here and have this conversation because they maintain us healthy. Of course, there's other types of bacteria, but the idea that something so small that we don't ever think of could have such an integral part to our survival as a species, right? We want to model the actual structure on the bacterium, but inside we want to have sort of this kind of like workshop space where people would be able to come in and think about sort of different angles with which we can examine our everyday world, right? So how do we take a step and like think about our immediate environment and just kind of learn something from it? And how does that change our consciousness?
What does something like that look like?
I have images. We actually, yes, we have architectural renderings, and we have like a written piece that kind of gives you this history of bacteria and what they do and why they're so important to like the survive. The bacteria is a troping figure. But what we were also thinking of was Octavia Butler and her story of the Uankali. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever read the Xenogenesis trilogy, right?
Yes.
And so, she's got these alien life forms that take the DNA from everything, right? And they store it and they learn from it and they co-evolve with it, right? They create this like different species of creatures based on like their archival practices. And so we wanted Seed Bank to be very much like that. It's like this setting where we can come into contact with different people, different species, different ideas, and sort of take something, hold something of what they want to give us. So for example, somebody comes in and they're like, I want to donate my pictures of my plants. Like this is my garden. Like this is who I co-evolve with, right? How can we learn something from somebody who is putting together this garden? How does that relationship with their garden space change the way they see the world, right? But to actually have like a center that would be dedicated to this, right? Or that would be dedicated to developing a multi-species consciousness. And I feel like that's really where our work has been taking us. It's like, how do we expand our conception of the social? Because right now we're living in a moment when ecologically speaking, it's like, it's a dangerous moment. We see all these tsunamis, earthquakes, that affect the livelihood of humans, that affect the livelihood of all sorts of things around the world. And how do we make an active intervention into changing that reality, right? How do we use something that as simple as like culture, as something that we participate in every day, to think about the world differently? And I'd say that's what we want to do, with a variety of different projects, from media to you know, this
I think this
architectural
is the
site.
way we try to the work in transmedia. So we use, when people say, you know, it's so funny because in the newspaper in my country, you know, every time say different about me. Say the filmmaker, other time say the tattoo artist, you know, and say and use, because I don't study, I don't have, you know, a paper say I am an artist, one I am, you know. I think what we use is these tools. So we working in different, you know, material, you know, support, you know, tattoo, film, drawing. You know,
It's really interdisciplinary, you know, like, for example, with Seed Bank, our idea is to create this like scenario, right? This place where things can happen. That doesn't mean that we have like, it's not like I feel like it's a space for speculative confabulation, right? So the idea that you can only work in one media seems to us really limited. So you're a curator, you know, so you know how to work with people, right? Or you know how to work with artists or cultural agents or whatever. That's a practice that you can use and that you can form, right? Same thing goes with, you know, different practices and different media applications. They can each tell different stories, right? Transmedia is about being able to tell different stories through different platforms. And I feel like it's so exciting that you don't have to be limited to one thing, right? That you can really move across disciplines in a fluid way and, you know, learning from different applications.
Definitely.
So
I wonder, who are your collaborators?
we have the first project that we did at Sin Kabeza was Aventuras Familiares, which was
you see this is a movie? It's a short movie.
it was a short
28
film.
minutes.
Yeah, 29 minutes.
So.
There we worked with Daniel Benavides, who's a filmmaker in Chile, and part of our strategy, it's an anarchist film, right? So the plot is about an anarchist group that is in the future and that is struggling against the multinational takeover of Chile, right? So Chile is no longer a country; it's now going to become a corporation, right? And there's these cyborg horsehead creatures that are the ones that are like the minions to the evil corporation. And so this group of very unique characters that include a clown, a porn star, and this, you know, just ridiculous characters are the ones who are leading this, you know, who become part of this struggle for liberation. And so this project we wrote together with Daniel Benavides, and that's where Sin Kabeza came from, because we were like, how do we film something as an anarchist collective? Like, how do we let go of our individual egos and work together? It was really hard.
Yeah, it's difficult.
You know, it was a fight. Like, we would fight with each other. You know, the ego comes out, and you
one moment, you know,
conjuring.
Yeah.
We filmed 1 week.
Yeah, we filmed 1 week. It was 7 days.
Yeah, and I think on day 3, it's
But-
going, you know,
I'm
heavy.
going to take you off the question, but what you're bringing up also makes me. You were just talking about. It also makes me think of what is that strategy to kind of alleviate, or if not alleviate the ego, kind of, you know, be more resourceful when you use the ego.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you know, how do you come to that place?
Well, we invented a game while we were filming, and it was the ego game, right? So every time we felt that somebody's ego, we would clap.
Every time when people say, "Oh, I feel very good," you know, for try to the compensation, the ego, and works on that. You know?
Yeah, it worked. We would laugh. You know, you wouldn't be angry. You would just kind of be like, because you kind of be like catching the other person, right? But I mean,
I'm so beautiful.
No, but I mean, I think that, you know, it wasn't always easy. It was like sometimes things would break down and we would be angry with each other, and like, you know, one has their vision, the other has a different. What we learned is that just because you work without a central structure, it doesn't mean that nobody can take leadership, right? So that you have to take accountability, right? So if you're angry and you feel like quitting the whole thing, like somebody has to be there to actually keep on going, because if not, it's going to fall through and it's not going to happen. So I feel like we learn things about what anarchy means, right? It's not just about nobody taking any responsibility, but that it's actually more so. It's like you have to take responsibility for wanting it to happen. The other thing was that, you asked about collaborators.
Yeah.
I mean, in that film, it's like we started off as, we can say that there's 3 directors, but there's also like all of the people who actually were in the film. And we worked with performance artists, we worked with people who were street performers, we worked with feminist performance artists. And
only one has a, actress.
Only one was an actress. There was one actress who's also a performance artist. And like they rewrote the script. I mean, like that's the thing. There was a script, but it wasn't really a script because if they gave us a good idea, the script would change, and like the scene itself would change. And so I think with the product, whatever the film is, I think it reflects that process. It's like it's got this energy that I think is unique. And when everybody went to see the screening this past year, when we inaugurated it in Chile, it was really interesting because I think people really liked it. I mean, they really enjoyed it. It was like all of those things that had changed from our original plan had actually really contributed to what it was in the end.
Right.
And the same thing with Quiltro. Quiltro, I feel like everyone...
Quiltro is completely different than the first project.
Quiltro is like our most recent, probably, and Art Farm Revisited. We also work with Roberto Mesa, who is also a video artist, and he's going to be getting his master's at MIT next year. I feel like, there's also like our alter egos, like we each do performance, and so those are other entities, that are not the same as Lisette and Cheto. It's like there's Cocorico and there's Naco Taco. And then there's, our friend, our deceased mentor, Luke Callow, who was very much an inspiration to the reason why we're really taking seriously these relationships, these affects that emerge across diverse relationships. So that, I feel like part of what we're looking to do is create this intimate space, and to really, the people who've seen the film that we recently, produced their reaction has been like, I felt like I was in the room. Like it didn't feel like that cold ethnographic, I'm going to do this analysis of you. Right. It was like, here I am in the room with you, like let's talk about this. And magical things happen when you have that type of relationship, when you have that type of affect.
Yes.
So I mean, I want to show you pictures of Seed Bank, but I can email them to you if you want before.
And the video, you can give the video.
Yeah, I can give you a whole collection.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Collection.
Yeah.
That would be great. A great way to spend my it's this Friday or Saturday. I don't even know what day of the week it is.
Yeah,
Friday.
Welcome.
Welcome
to our world. Yeah.
But you bring up a really, I think, great point when you were speaking, and that is about leadership.
Yeah.
Because I am thinking about, when an organization doesn't have a head, right? How do you then kind of devise this notion of leadership? And I feel like in relation to thinking about leadership, then you also, I'm thinking about how you kind of designate roles, and then what roles mean in terms of identities.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of curious as to how you devise leadership strategies, and then how these strategies shift roles and shift identities, and that type of those type of relationships.
What do you think?
You?
Well, I mean, I feel like, as cheesy as it may sound to some people, I really feel that checking your ego is part of a leadership strategy. It's like, when are you, I feel like that's part of, when you work with someone else, you have to consistently be negotiating the terrain, because, if one of you is going to be the dominant one, then it's not going to be a collaboration. It's just going to be, it's like a asymmetrical power relationship. And I think that happens always, right? But I would say that, we each have different talents. I
think this is the point. I think you need, put your ego down and understand you good and this and the other people good another part. You know, you need a
Right.
set. You know, the idea is good in one part, and your idea is good in the other part. You know, and I think in my idea, I don't believe in the I don't believe in he, she. I believe in someone. We are only one. You know, I feel, you know, everything is connected. You know, and I'm not Buddhist, but I believe in this. You know, I feel, you know, example right now the Olympics. I feel sad sometimes because when I feel one people is winner, I feel he's not winner because when other people, you know, last don't exist winner. You know.
Right.
Right, like our whole reality conceptualization where everybody's running for this one thing and like everyone else is a loser. I feel like that's very much a replication of capitalist ideals and ideology.
I think this is the problem.
That there can only be one.
And so much I feel like about spectacle. I feel like that notion of, I've been watching a lot of Olympics as well. I'm totally into it way more than I ever thought that I would be. You know, I was like really kind of like, you know, like, oh, the Olympics are coming on, whatever. Then they came on and I was like, every day wanted to see what was on. But I've been thinking a lot about it because just for the same reasons that you're, you know, this notion of competition and what really these athletes are competing against, you know, isn't really so much each other, but about these other kind of forces of nature. You know, it's like gravity, water, air. You know, I mean, like speed. I mean, these like metaphysical things. Like
sometimes I feel it's very masculine idea. You know, the sperm going to first. You know, the ovulo. I think it's I don't like me in real. I don't like the competition.
Yeah, but that's so much about the spectator. You know, it's that competition is what drives us, and the people in the audience to watch. You know, it's like it wouldn't be necessarily so interesting if they were just kind of talking about gymnastics in terms of gravity. Right. You know what I mean? This is like science class. You know, but to add that extra element of this person is competing with this person, now you want to watch. And I think that's that additional filter that translates the games into something that is a spectacle, right? And that people want to be able to see, but then also really diminishes the impact of what it is that these people are engaged in. The activity, like what they can do with their bodies, is incredible. And you kind of lose that because it's all about, for spectacle's sake, medals and how many minutes this person came in, you know, or how much under a minute somebody came in, which is all great ways of quantifying the magnificence of the thing, but it really kind of, I feel.
Right, because they're giving us a frame.
Exactly.
And the problem, and this, I mean, I feel like that actually really touches on like what our frame is, right? So I mean, I mentioned the bacteria before, and I think I jumped without explaining. You know, I feel like one of the key tropes of our work right now is coevolution, right? So this idea that to be able to evolve, right, to be able to develop this evolutionary, you know, movement, it's never by yourself. Like this idea of the autogenetic body, the body that is like closed, that, you know, the phallic body, like this body that we've inherited from Western philosophy, right? The idea of like being able to, I don't know, direct rational thought from this like, you know, mind. You know, I feel like that is such, again, like that's such a limited notion of how it is that actually as a society we work, you know, and so that the idea that, you know, you see Cheto, you see me as like individual bodies here, but like how have we cross-contaminated each other, right? And so when we collaborate, it's, you know, or when we collaborate with Roberto, with Danielle, or with Carola, or with the dogs of the street, right? The idea that you can take, you know, like that you're taking and you're giving, and the bacteria model, I mean, the bacteria is like what has allowed us to co-evolve, right? The idea that as like creatures on this planet, like we need that pigeon who walks around. Like we don't know what they're giving us, right? Or we need, you know, this conversation. This is going to allow us to have a different conceptualization than when we started here today, right? So that the idea that there is no unity, like there are not unity, but like individuality,
right?
right? That the idea that you can only be an artist or you can only be a cultural worker, you can only be an academic. No, like we're consistently evolving our, to be able to survive, we have to be able to learn from other things, from other processes, and adapt, and co-evolve. I think, and I think that that's a really important thing to think about right now. That it's not about competition. That the reason that Olympian can win, is because there's somebody else that's also practicing and that's also there, and that's not necessarily the winner, but that it's part of that entire relationship, right? Absolutely. So I think that that's, why can't there be two winners, or why can't there be two people who are exceptional and who work, why can't something that exists amongst many be more exceptional than something that exists in one field, and I think interdisciplinarity is about that. It's about how you are able to assimilate different types of knowledges and frameworks and produce something different, produce something that's just a little bit better, just a little bit, gonna get us somewhere different. So, I don't know, I think that's what we try to do.
So, I also wonder how you take these really big ideas, right, these abstracts, and make them digestible, receivable,
right,
to people, because and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's about having people have to align themselves exactly with what it is, excuse me, that you're thinking, but that there's something else that can develop, that there's the potential is infinite, in terms of what the translations are. Hopefully, ideally. So I wonder, how do you take big ideas and turn them into practice?
It's difficult.
I feel like play. Like I would say that.
Don't take so serious.
Yeah, it's like, okay, here I am talking about the way that I develop a relationship with my dog. Like I feel like part of the trick is being able to pinpoint things that other people are going to be able to identify with, right? So maybe you don't have a relationship with a dog, but you can relate to the sensation of love, perhaps, that one person transmits. And perhaps that sensation is what's going to be the bridge, right? So that, you don't have to feel the same things I do, because I have a unique existence in the world. I have unique experiences that put me in contact with others. And I think part of like the archival process, like that we propose, for example, in Seed Bank, is that. It's like, how can, obviously our experiences are not the only ones, right? The idea that, there's other people who are creating knowledge in interesting ways. How do you tap into that?
Right.
And I feel like that if you're looking for it, you will find it, If you're not asking, then obviously you're not going to be able to, have any idea of what the other person is thinking or how they're relating to the world in perhaps interesting ways. So it's kind of like you're fishing, it's like you're fishing and, you bring something in and, obviously without all the gore of actually fishing, but conceptually. And I think, I don't know, I feel like big ideas are so simple because they transmit something that everybody understands, right? Or there's like, it's like that sensation that comes from inside that unites people. And I think that that's where it's really important. The way that you translate affect is vital. Like if it's gonna be very cold and it's gonna use, Audre Lorde's, the master's tools will never bring down the master's house. If you're gonna use a type of format that's going to estrange people, if you're going to speak in this, metaphysical language, and it's not going to get to anybody, it's not going to do anything.
Yeah.
Except propagate your own ego.
Yeah.
And that's not. I don't think that's conducive to anything.
So then, how do you deal with confusion? Because I think that there's an element of confusion that almost sounds like it's necessary.
Yeah.
Or imperfection.
Yeah, imperfection, confusion. Well, I think, like, for example, so many of the projects that we do are also so open-ended, right? So that there is no narrative, right? I think people are really uncomfortable when there's not a narrative. Like, okay, I have to like interpret this for myself. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, what are they? And I think that that's fine. right? You know, that's fine that people have, I feel like, again, for us, part of our practice is making people feel things. And so like, if they don't feel the same thing we do, that's fine.
Yeah.
If they don't feel anything, then I feel like we're in trouble.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, you know, if they're angry, if they're, you know, intrigued, if they're confused, they're feeling something. And if they're confused, they have questions. And questions for me seem better than presenting them with answers that either they're going to want to take or not. So
We say, if you don't have question, you don't have answer.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
And this is the problem.
How
More
can-
people
yeah.
I feel don't have questions.
If you don't have questions, how can you have
You're absolutely
answers?
right.
Exactly.
That's right. That's it. That's. It's making me think about many things. It's so true.
Yeah.
Future of the world.
Right.
That's crazy.
Well, I mean, it's 2012. It's, you know, the end of one era.
The end of the world.
We'll see what happens next. But I think, you know, we're entering a period where there's definitely a sense of urgency, as in many times before us. And I think that, you know, all of us are trying to do something about that sensation we feel. You know.
So I'm trying to think about now which direction I should go in. If I should ask you about dreams, because you brought up dreams, or if I should talk more about people. I think we want to talk more about people, and then we'll talk about dreams.
Okay.
How are people a part of your process?
Oh, the people is involved in the process.
Because you said that, you know, when you make, you're not thinking about the public when you make, right? But then there is this co-evolution, if I said, if I'm using the right term, and this notion of being a part of some kind of whole, right? That implicates others.
I feel, example, my you know, basic part in my life, I think, is drawing. You know, more the right and drawing. You know, the key. And so I think I understand the work about drawings. You know, the more book I like is painter. You know, I think, in my opinion, right now I don't have so much interest in what people say real art. You know, Gauguin, or you know, Paris, Picasso, etc. I have so much interest. And people don't have interest in drawing, but drawing, you know. I feel, you know, every people has interesting part inside, you know. In everything, I feel some people, you know, say me, you know, for me it's impossible drawing. I don't believe, you know, it's possible for you to take a pen, you know,
you can create a
hands,
gesture,
you know,
right? Yeah, so.
It's possible. You drawing, you know. I think what I like in the human, the people, people human, you know, is the what is deja atrás, ¿cómo se llama?
The trace.
The gesto.
And the gesture.
In everything, you know, in all how, you know, when I move to the here, I look in, you know, the wall and I feel, you know, you every time produce, you know, gesto, you know, gesture, and this is where I like me in humans. Where, for example, one part the city bank, this structure, is
seed bank.
The seed bank is the idea put every people going inside. It's possible for you put you know, your camera and you project your video, your family. You know, what I like me, you know, in my opinion, about Facebook or YouTube, is you have right now the possibility to understand the world in different way. How is only TV.
Yes.
You know, the structure of the TV. You know, example about, you know, conscious animal. You have the scientific part. They talk about what the idea, you know, in National Geographic, what is the dog or the relation dog. But you have example on Facebook, the people put picture or talk about and take more human his dog. You know, I like me so much this idea. I think outside the structure of the TV on everything. It's very interesante, you know, every people has to show us algo, como algo que mostrar.
Everybody has something to show.
You know, every people, I think, and the problem in the structure, if you think you don't drawing good, you think, oh, I don't draw, you know. The structure, the system put out more marginalized.
Marginalized.
So, you also make me think of when you brought up the point about television and internet. You know, I wonder what is that difference. You know, like how is the spectator of television different than someone who?
For example, I think it's, for example, in my opinion, in Facebook you have more possibility that has that you feeling, because it's not directly the contact, you know. But I feel, in my, for example, for me, you know, I had what is the structure of the Facebook, you know, working, I know, you know, how's the power, blah, blah, blah. But in good part, I'm from Chile, you know, my country is so far away, so I feel more connection, more close, you know. I think in YouTube sometimes too, you know, because one people, you know, put the video and you see your video is a shit, or your video is so good, or I like me, or I don't like me, you know.
Right.
I think you have more connection with the other people. I think this is where we need, you know. I think this is, I think right now it's more pushing to, you know, don't look in the other and say, oh, you are black, or you are gay, or you are, you know, a freak, you know. I think people today, I know how many, but in my, you know, expected, or my dream, I like me, you know, more people pushing to has more contact, more real contact, you know, more see the other and say, oh, this guy, you know, what I think is beautiful, is, you know, but he has, you know, beautiful the meaning, you know. This is what my understanding is.
Yeah,
I feel
it changes almost the concept of contact.
Yeah,
You know
absolutely.
what I mean?
Well, I mean, I feel like, you know, the screen, we work with experimental TV, but I feel like when you get the TV transmission, you're dealing, in terms of curatorial terms, right? You're dealing with somebody else's curating, right? And now, how technology allows us to kind of subvert that curation of the television, because we can use our DVR to record what we want to see, right? In a similar way, like Facebook or these social media technologies, they allow us to see people's collections, like their own mediation of what's important that day, right? So I'm actually kind of an obsessive Facebooker, right? I'm always on. I read, like, the way that I access, like, the news is so different since I'm an active Facebooker, because I don't necessarily have to go to the New York Times first, right? It's like almost like because of who my friends are, right, on Facebook, and who are the people who are the ones that are posting the most or whatever, I'm getting kind of like it's like a filtering of the information that I'm actually interested in.
Right.
You know, through everybody else's curation. And then it's like you take from my friend who has this article on, you know, Huey P. Newton's dissertation, and I'm going to borrow that, and then somebody's going to take that from, and so there's this strange transmission that's going on. And that's part of why we're interested in the construction of these participatory archives, right? So the idea that if we create this site that is a participatory archive, right, and there's programming, right, so that somebody can come in and they want to project their movie, and they can do that because the wall is a projection screen, and they don't have to go through the, you know, the person who's at the door who's telling them whether or not it's good or bad. It's just like there, right? And if somebody else comes in at that time and they see somebody projecting something, and maybe it's not the most interesting, but they realize that they can project something that they want to see in, you know, big or whatever. I feel like there's a different type of circulation, right? That oftentimes the gallery or the museums it's just not made that way, right? So that there always has to be this person who's the arbiter of taste, right?
Yes.
Whereas I feel like, in a way, you can use different technologies to get around that, right? And so, for example, you know, when you ask us about how we work together, you know, it's like, okay, one of us puts an idea, another one puts an idea. We use a NASA model. You know, I don't know if you've ever, Cheto was the one who introduced me to this, the NASA think tank model, which is that everybody throws ideas and nobody's allowed to critique in the first round. It's like, you can say like, okay, I want to build a cup that's red. And then the other person says, okay, and I'm going to add some wings, you know, and nobody stops to interrupt the creative process and say, no, that's not good yet, right? You can talk about that later. But at the beginning, you have to give people the chance to just like say crazy things, right? To say, or to like propose things that you wouldn't expect before you put that censorship on them. Like later on, once you have like, you know, the idea that you've created with your friends, the brainstorming session has passed, you can say, okay, well, you know, let's think about the wings because maybe that's not going to work so well, or, you know, whatever reason. But I feel like so many times we get stopped before we can say something crazy.
Right, right.
And so I feel like that's what we kind of want to help, you know, is to like let people just kind of participate, you know, just let them express something, let them leave their trace. What would happen if, you know, if we had what if we, I don't think it's that museums can't be that way or that galleries can't be that way. It's just that we have like a series of structures that have made them a certain way, you know, throughout history, and there's people who have subverted those structures.
Right.
And so I feel like, you know, it'd be so interesting if there was like an open archive somewhere. You know, and if a museum was consistently just curating that open archive, if it was just, you know, and I feel like we can do that.
Right.
Like technologically, there's so many ways that that's actually feasible, more feasible than like sending a painting in the mail, you know?
Right.
Or maybe that could also be part of it, I don't know. But I feel like part of the thing is seeing how these technologies open possibilities for different things to happen, right? So, you know, in some cases the medium is the message, you know, and in some cases it isn't. Sometimes you have to like play around with the mediation of the material so that it makes sense, right?
Right.
So that it produces less confusion than is, you know, troublesome or whatever.
Right.
But I mean, I think that you have to be willing to play. You have to be willing to not have extremely rigid structures about what can and can't happen.
Right. What you're saying makes me think a lot about the idea of selection, you know, because new media, new technologies, you know, all these ways in which you're working with moving images and the idea of movement and being in different places and, you know, just kind of letting people create, right? Museums, this type of interactivity is really kind of butting up against the way that we come to think of notions of how culture is made, culture is produced. And I think that's where a lot of the challenges come from, because, you know, we're kind of like in this sort of crux moment, and I think we've been for a long time now, for decades now, at this sort of crossroads, or however many roads, of sort of reordering how culture is selected. You know, whose culture is it? What is it? You know, what's going to be? How are we going to reconstruct this narrative? You know what I mean? For what's contemporary culture? What does that look like? You know what I mean? So. And it's also something that's come up as a part of this. You know, when you bring in a curator to do a grant, and so how are you getting beyond this notion of selection and all this thing? And so it's like not trying to ignore that selection is a part of it. You know, there is kind of, you know, when you're involved in the process of adding, you know, attributes to the cup, you know, there is, you know, a choice of putting that to the cup, and putting that, right? Like that too. There is a process of selection there, and then when you get to the next phase where then you open it up for critique, then there's a process of selection there. And there are these processes of selection that don't that I think can be productive in thinking about, and not necessarily in the way we're used to thinking about selection in terms of authoring, you know, but there is something about subjectivity that is related to this notion of selection and editing and curating and making, you know. How do we open that up for honest discourse, right? That there is, I mean, you know, yes, to make culture, no problem, to make culture,
it's over there,
or to make art, you know, to come up with projects and ideas, you have to select in some way. I
mean, I think it's like what you say, you know, there's a distilling process, you know, and I think that, I guess it's like the interesting thing, you know, for me about this curatorial project, you know, curating a grant. It's very interesting, and I think that you're going to come out, you know, like I feel like you're going to have this opportunity to, like, you know, see these different ways of, like, you know, thinking and about, and there's going to be a decision. But I wonder how it will change your own conception of curating a grant. Like if you would curate a grant differently the next time. You know? Like, and I think that that's likely, you know, because like every time you participate in something, you have, you know, the things that work, the things that don't work. You find the glitches through doing, right? And so then you propose something different. And so I feel like it's a very interesting thing for you as well, you know, and for the people who are going to be watching this, because they're going to be able to say like, okay, well, in the end they did select 4. Like, what would have happened if they had just given everyone $500?
Right.
Like, would that have been as useful? Should it be that perhaps there should be a bigger philanthropist that comes and gives more money so that they can give it to everybody? How would our system change if we didn't have to have grants? I mean, like, that for me is like really important. Like, what if, you know, like, what if every, you know, if being an artist is not exceptional, if it's something that we expect everyone to participate in, right? And that's part of, you know, that's also part of what we're working with this participatory archive, is that, or with this model for a participatory archive, is the idea that, you know, not only artists are the ones who make culture.
Oh, for sure.
You know, that like there are interesting things happening all around us that, you know, don't get put inside of the museum and that are just as vital, you know, to our growth as, like, you know, beings in this world. And so I think that, you know, I think that each time you participate in a project, you are able to kind of take a step back and say like, okay, and like, where do we push the envelope farther? How do we get, again, co-evolution from this experience? You're going to co-evolve with your artists and with your friends and with your, you know, interlocutors, and you're going to have a different vision.
Right.
And in a sense, like, you know, that's not the objective, perhaps, of the curating a grant, but it's going to give you an interesting vision, and it's going to give us who are participating in it a different vision about what grants mean too.
Oh, for sure.
You know, so I feel like there's always these ripples.
Yeah.
That happen in unexpected ways.
Oh yeah, and especially I think when you are kind of challenging the pre-existing model, or at least the dominant model.
The dominant, yeah.
You know? When you open up possibilities to think in a different way at getting to the recognizable goal, so much about how you're already conditioned to be a part of that system comes up.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of competition immediately comes up.
Yeah.
You know, how do I compete in this? You know? Or if it's curated, I feel like I can't compete. I'm already, you know, kind of against. And, you know, so I mean, there's these, you know, there's all these kind of preconceptions of what people put onto, you know, what applying for a grant is, what a curator does, the relationship between a curator and an artist. So this process has really kind of brought forward the ways in which I feel like the existing models train cultural producers to think in a certain way so that they can be funded. So, you know, it shifts where the power is a little bit. And so when you were talking about responsibility, you know, that anarchy comes with responsibility, and with greater responsibility to a large extent. You know, it's like you kind of have to take responsibility for figuring out how this process can be rewarding to you, on the chance that you may not get funded, but it's still useful in some kind of way. So what is being granted? Right? It's almost like you have to kind of hand out checks because you have said, well, we're going to make this a grant, so there's got to be some money in it. You know, because that's what people will eventually think. But if we're being involved in starting to create alternative economies, maybe we're constructing different value systems as well. But it's when you kind of bring together these two value systems, or definitely this one value system that's connected to how philanthropy and the visual arts already exist, but then the possibilities of these different value systems, then it really starts to create, just, for lack of a better term, confusion. You know, which is why I asked you the question about how you turn ideas into tangible things. Because for me, it's about how do I then make this confusion productive space. And you know, what you're saying about play is really important. And then earlier you mentioned dreams. You know, so it's like, I'm curious to hear talk more about dreams and the notion of dreams in relation to imagination.
I mean, I think that there's nothing more important right now than having and having big dreams. You know, because I think that we live in a very depressing world, and it's, you know, we talked about Facebook. I think that lots of times, like, turning on Facebook is like, it's painful because you see, you know, that there's slavery, that there's, you know, ecological destruction, that people are poor, and that they're, you know, suffering, and there's suffering. you know, the realization that there's so much suffering at all times, and that you feel so, you know, unable to react to so much suffering. And I know, and I think it's very important to have impossible dreams, and to have, you know, and to really work on envisioning how those impossible dreams would work. And that's why you know, I feel like that's why we've been working so much with speculative fiction. Is like, you know, okay, so let's say that this is the present and we see how things are working, but what could happen if, you know, like we were just a little bit in a different galaxy, you know, like what could be possible?
Yes.
And I feel like not forgetting, you know, not like, I think it's Ursula Le Guin who talks about how the best science fiction is the science fiction that is actually exactly about what's going on right now, but that, you know, creates these alternate possibilities. And I've never been more inspired than I think by what I feel like is a very big speculative term right now in general through, you know, cultural production. You've got people who, I feel like the present is so daunting that people are dreaming. You know, I think that they really are, you know, I think that we have to go through a quick moment of consciousness. Like we have to acquire a different type of consciousness. We have to decolonize the way that we're thinking because it's not working.
This is the point.
You know, it's not working. You know, everybody is suffering, and it's like even if you're, you know, it's like you see these people who have tons of money and who are still in pain, and you're like, there's something fundamentally wrong if there's so many people, and it's imaginary to believe that everybody can't feel it, right? That there's not that palpable presence of that imperfection always with us, right? And it's like one of the Buddhist philosophies that I think is actually very helpful is the idea that you can't disengage from a world that is imperfect, right? That you have to continually be thinking about what your role is in making those imperfections lesser, right? And it can be colonizing to believe that you think you're going to change the world. You know, like it can also be something oppressive. You know, I have tons of young students who think that they're going to go out and change the world, and here you're like, hey, that's kind of, you're encroaching on somebody else's space. Like, who are you to go into this different community? Like, why not work from here in New York? You know, like as if there's not things wrong all around you.
Right.
You know, so you have to be careful, and you have to be you can't be holed up and not have anybody respond to what you're doing either, right? But I do think that there's that urgency right now to dream big, because if not, then, you know, it's dire.
Yeah.
It's dire if we don't dream big, if we don't think that there's a change possible. So, you know, it's kind of like, how are you going to survive? How are you going to keep on working every day if you don't think that that big dream is perhaps distant? Maybe you won't see it, but that it's on, you know, that you'll be a part of at least germinating the seed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you make me think about a lot of things, you know, how just kind of the capacity to dream in the way that you're thinking about dreaming, or, you know, the capacity to imagine has so much to do with taking a leadership kind of mentality in your own life, you know, and being receptive and open, you know. So just, I think it's clever to think about the system in relation to trying to shift certain cycles of the way things are working, but then also how those cycles have become indoctrinated in the minds of people, and then, you know, what happens when you have an opportunity to kind of strike out on a different imaginative trajectory, right? What do you do when you have that, when that moment happens for you? And I think a large part of it is like observing what that action is. when you kind of bring that, when you put that on the table, like, oh, well, you know, have you thought about it this way? And just like that moment of like thought about what? You know what I mean? I think that's kind of the moment of impact. Right. Well,
I mean, we have, like, I feel like you know, one of our biggest inspirations has been the relationship that we built with our companion species, toy poodle Luke. And, you know, I feel like his loss last year was probably the most fundamental pain I've ever felt, you know, like the world crumbling around you and feeling that there's, you know, there are things that can't be changed, you know, like that there are these like, you know, terrible things that happen and that they happened. And I feel like what it brings about is that moment of impact that you mentioned brings about a vulnerability in the self where you have the capacity to see things very clearly and where you have the capacity to kind of stop and learn from that intense sensation. And you have the capacity to do something with that. You know, and I feel like it's very easy to fall over to the other side, to slip into just the pain. You know, I feel like it's you know, it's unfortunate that that's very real, but I think that, you know, if you're able to confront that dark side that exists, and at the same time learn from it, and have that motivate you to do something different, then I think that you're learning from life.
Right.
Life is continually trying to show you things. You know, it's continually teaching you lessons. You have desires, you have fantasies. You know, you change those desires and fantasies as time goes, as you reflect. You know, but I think that a lot of it, you know, is learning from failure as well. You know, and learning from the things that really hurt. You know, and I think that that's, you know, that's what we don't see on reality TV. We don't see somebody learning from failure. We just see the failure and we see the winner.
Right. Right.
Right. We don't.
I mean, I wish it was so simple.
Yeah.
You know, like I would just want to know when I'm winning or I'm losing. Like that would be really like some great clarity. Like, oh, okay. You know, it's because they're in real life. There's not that.
Yeah, exactly. There's no.
Am I losing right now? I don't even know. Can't tell.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I mean, and that's like the problem is people think in those terms, you know, like success, failure.
Right.
Like there's these binary constructions that you can, like, no, absolutely not. You know, like how am I going to learn from something that you're calling a failure? You know, like if I just call it that, and what exactly am I learning from success? You know, like what does that mean? And how do I recontextualize that? And, you know, I think that if you realize your impact, you know, if you realize that, you know, sometimes your moment of joy is somebody else's moment of, you know, suffering, then it humbles you. And I think, that's what I mean by relinquishing ego. I think that when you know, there's positive things to the ego. The ego can make you dream big, you know, but it's like maintaining that balance where it's...
Yes, the good ego, when, you know, when say, I don't remember who, Asado, you know, say, porque every time is, it's easy saying, you know, ego is completely bad, you know, but I don't believe it. I believe you have a good ego and bad ego, you know. Y así que you listen, you good ego is good, you know, because you don't try to destroy, you don't try to push other people, you know. And I think in this part, when you feel, when I talk about good ego, I talk about I'm here, you know, and what I have this body, it's possible for me make this, you know. This is, I think this is in every artist where I know, I think it's the beautiful part. The other, you know, the other part is the bad, you know. When you make a compete with other artists, when you, it's for example, in my experience for documenta, you know, I have inside the documenta videos. My experience personal is a little bad about friends from Chile, because I feel I have this invitation. My other partners, they don't have invitation. They feel pain. You know, I make a pain. I don't try to make pain, but it's, you know, because what? Because they have a name. You know, you go inside. You know, it's and for real, every this institution and this part there, I think it's illusion. It's not real. You know, o sea, it's more real. You know, other shit. You know, this is what I feel.
Well, I mean, and that's why I bring up the question of selection earlier. You know, that I feel like there's this idea, there's almost this false sense of equity you know, like I feel like equality is such like
Meritocracy,
a
yeah.
myth of like when you brought up capitalism, it's this mythology that we've created because we also have this mythology of democracy and every vote counting.
Yes.
But every vote doesn't count, and
Yes.
there's no such thing as equality. And in a lot of places, a lot of cultures, you know, things are very stratified, but that's accepted.
Yeah.
Because that, you know, you kind of give reverence to the social structure, but that structure is not necessarily based on creating wealth for just one particular
Right.
group of people to the detriment of another. But there's this other kind of way of communing, you know, where social stratifications are, you know, they can work in different ways,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I lost my train of thought with that, but this idea of, you know, one day everyone will be selected in some way, and there's this the notion of community that kind of, I feel like, helps to keep that emotion.
Yeah.
You know, it's like selection is about turns, and everybody's not doing everything at the same time. You were talking about people have different gifts and positions that they're supposed to play, and you should know your position, and this time it's for, you know, this person's position, another time it's another position. But being a part of that community and that whole, you can see the benefit there of being able to cohabitate in that way, as being able to perhaps evaluate success,
Right.
you know, off of the success of another individual.
Yeah.
You know, I think it happens a lot with, you know, especially if you're getting into something like Documenta, the Venice Biennale. It's like, oh, you know, it definitely brings up that bad ego.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel like we're a part of our intervention. People have, one of the surprising things is people don't even ask us what we're going to be doing. It's kind of like there's just like this kind of like, I'm not even going to engage the fact that you're part of this. It's just like we can't. And what's funny is that, you know, in a sense we're taking it very much with a grain of salt, and part of our intervention there is that we want to do a healing ritual. And it's precisely because we feel like these spaces create you know, there's a lot of negative energy that goes there. You know, like there's a lot of suffering for people who feel like they haven't been recognized, or that they've been working and it's serious and it's real, and there are people who of course should be included in all of these things, you know, and they don't. And it's just like, you know, and so we want to take that very seriously. You know, in a you know, there are all these things that we don't see, right? And all those energies affect us. You know, like if somebody's hating you, even though we don't see that, you know, like it affects you. It affects, and like that's exactly what we want to expel, is like these, you know, it's like you want to generate good energy, right? You want to generate something that's going to make people feel good.
Right.
You know, you don't want to be part of this pain. So that's part of what we want to do, is we want to just do a healing ritual, you know, and say like let's like exercise like the fact that this exists in this venue, that it's
a dream.
Yeah, that it's a dream, that this is part of an illusion, right?
Right.
That it's part, you know, it has a very real effect, but at the same time, it's also just, you know,
right.
It's just this thing, you know. It's like, okay, it doesn't have an effect on most people in the world, you know. Like most people don't know what it is, and that's fine. They shouldn't have to know what it is.
I remember when I say, I'm born in the farm in my country, very in the south, and one day. And say my grandmother, you know, she's a farmer, you know, say abuelita, you know, grandmother, and say, you know, he painted the Mona Lisa? And my grandmother say, no, and say, Leonardo. And next time my grandmother say me, who is the Mona Lisa? You know, I understand, I'm very kids, but I remember in this moment I understand, oh, that's it.
Yeah, like who is Leonardo da Vinci to her? It doesn't matter to her real life, you know?
It's not important for so many people.
That's
and
right.
Yeah.
But, you know, kind of shifting your relationship to those systems, I think, has everything to do with that goodness that you're speaking about, being able to be generated for the benefit of the community.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, because again, co-evolution, like you can't, it's not like two people are going to like, you know, rule the world. Like, no, it's like the only way to change things is if you have an impact beyond your own body, right? So that it's like something that multiplies and that continues and that is, you know, threaded through. Like when you see somebody talk, you know, like, and they give an incredible speech, right? that speech is possible because of whatever the experience is that with those multiples that are behind them that we don't see. But again, it's like that DNA that we have, that we come into contact with, and that we take from everything around us. You know, DNA is a bad word because it's like too scientific, but it's like whatever that is, it's like that thing. You know?
This is probably we for other people. I think we are believe so much in the ADN.
In DNA,
you know,
yeah. I think you're right.
I have the idea to travel in this summer to Kumbhala. Kumbhala is a big festival in India. It's almost 5 years and 5 years. And you see the more sadhus, the more yogis and holy men in India. Some people, this is the only time when going
from the cave. Yeah, it's like they come down from the cave every 20 years to come into this festival.
And the more important, when the first time when I read about this, when people say, "Oh, and touch in this moment," you know, in Kumbhala, the 2000, remember, and touch so many feet
of the yogis, of the holy people, yeah.
And today I'm going to touch. Is I had the possibility the every holy man because I feel the personal contact with other people, some the meaning, algo, you know.
Something's there.
You know,
so something happens when you're breathing in the same space.
Oh, definitely.
You know, like there's I don't know what it is, but there's something that's coming in through our pores and it's changing us. I think they just, there was some scientific study recently about how the DNA that you have when you're born is very different from the DNA that you have when you die, right? So that, you know, so that it's not like we believe that there's these
static.
it's like we think that there's these rigid structures and really they're not, you know, it's like they're consistently changing because that's the only way we can survive really is if we adapt, you know, if we change with the realities. So it's like, for example, a lot of our practice right now has to do with shamanism. We did a residency with a Nepali shaman last summer in Kathmandu. And you know, he has a center for shamanistic studies. He used to be a trekker up to the Himalayas. Like he's played all sorts of roles, and we want to go and sort of make a film project about both his like story and the type of practices that the shaman engage in, and the magic, you know, like the magic that they do.
Their shaman believe they are
the healing process.
They are el equilibrio.
They believe that they're the equilibrium of the world, right? So that
it's the more yogis and more shaman disappear, it's probably the world going more down. You know, it's probably fantasy, but you know,
you never
know. I know if it's real or no, it's real, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like one of the things that, you know, that we learn from these people is it's so hard from a Western rational knowledge to see somebody engaging with something that you can't see. You know, or the idea that the world is a lie. I mean, it's scary if you think about it. I think that's why so many people are resistant to it. It's easier to think that everything is as you see it and that, you know, you can have some control over it.
Right.
But as soon as you realize that you're not in control, I think that's where the dreams also happen. You know, like that's where and I've been telling Chito, I think that it's fascinating to me because, you know, part of the thing about science fiction that I don't like in a lot of mainstream novels is it's always about the like new gadget and the technology. I mean, when we were studying there with the shaman and they were, you know, they take out their drum, you know, which we have a pair of them, and they start their drumming. Their drum is their spaceship.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's like, you know, Sun Ra, it's like the idea that we have of what is, you know, possible or where we can travel, the worlds that exist. I mean, if you just do a little bit of investigation about different types of cultural imaginaries, it's fascinating. You know, it's like how, you know, it's like they've been communicating with the cosmos since the beginning of time. You know, the performances that we do relate us to the world, you know, like the type of, you know, and I think that we lose that with kind of this rationalism, right? With this scientific rationalism, the idea that we have an effect beyond what we understand. And every time there's something that science doesn't understand, it doesn't exist. You know, it's like
not in reality.
No, you know, it's like it's unexplainable, therefore it isn't. You know, and like that makes no sense. You know, so I feel like a part of the enthusiasm that I have about our work right now is that it's playful, and it's, you know, at the same time it's very serious in the sense that we are engaging with, you know, these, you know, the shamanic practices of the high Nepali tradition, you know, and like that's a very real and serious investigative part of our work. But there's also like the magical, playful, you know, okay, where do we take that and how do we, you know, in a postmodern world, how do we adapt it to a different type of urban sensibility?
Right.
You know?
Right.
The idea that authenticity is not something, that's authenticity is constructed.
Right.
And, trying to break through those things that we expect, like those authentic models we expect, and trying to rupture that. And, it's scary to people, I think. You know?
I think, anything unknown is.
Yeah, it's scary.
At least it's anxiety building.
Yeah.
It's like, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I am very much interested in this idea of generosity as a part, just in terms of thinking about what social engagement is. And you mentioned earlier the word helping, like, this kind of common understanding of social engagement is about sort of helping people, if you will. But I want to just sort of maybe translate that or use another word instead of helping, and think about it more in terms of a generousness, some kind of generosity that's taken place. So, I just want to hear your thoughts on how you think that idea plays out in your practice.
The opposite of generosity would be selfishness, right? Probably. And I feel like that's, again, it's like, what is selfishness if not, that ego that like wants it all, right? And I think that, part of like the social, again, is like the ecological. How do you create an ecosystem where multiple creatures can survive and thrive? And I think that that's I think generosity has to do with that, with like relinquishing the selfish impulse, right? So realizing that if you're selfish, you're actually doing harm to yourself, because it's putting up barriers, it's limiting the porosity of something else being able to affect you, right? So it's like if you construct a selfish nature, it's like you're closing yourself off. Whereas if you, I think the generous is trying to open, right? I think generosity, in the sense of like how we work, I think we depend on generosity because we don't have money. So like, when we make a film project and we meet people who are doing performance, right, and who don't make money either, and we say, hey, we want to all get together on these, 3 days, and would you be willing to participate? But we don't have any money. You're depending on somebody else's generosity and somebody else's willingness to invest that time with you. So it's, it's mutual. In that sense, I really do think it's a mutualistic symbiosis that you're trying to create, and that you're trying to be accessible to. You can't work with everyone.
Right.
So of course there's a selection.
Right.
I'm going to work with the people who I'm going to be able to work with. There's some people I'm not going to be able to work with, it's just not going to, we don't have the right chemistry perhaps. But I think that, you are able to develop a chemistry with various people and other things and other creatures, and and I think that it's about being able to let go of the control sometimes, or to be willing to like be flexible is a way of being generous, of not, it's really hard, I think we're all colonized beings, I think we've all inherited this tremendous baggage, and we don't even realize when we're reproducing structures of power that are harmful. Right. And so I think that
this is the same. The idea where in my opinion I have for the construction in my country, the kids, is generosity is almost Christian part. O sea, you are here because you need to win. You need to And example, the Jain in India is Lord Mahavira is contemporary to the Buddha. It's other illuminated people. But these guys say human here for take care the earth and the animals. And right now, when I read for the first time, because it's more popular Buddha, and when I discovered this guy don't think only about humans. He think about around the animals, there. I feel that is so real, when you use your generosity, you feel good, You go in the street and you give money, or you give the opportunity to a friend, you right now, this is good for you. I say spirit because it's so difficult to understand what is spirit, but one part of you is happy, because you use your generosity. O sea, I think human, we are in the hair for this, for give to the other, and I think the system block this part. As you try to have better sneaker or better camera or everything better than your other friend, and I feel this is a error.
I mean, that's a scary thing about the system that we're living in, is that it's ultimately like we're really the ones who are going, like it can destroy us. Like if the world were to end because of a nuclear fallout or something, like there would be processes that it's impossible to extinguish all life, right? But it's very possible to extinguish ourselves. So it's like it just doesn't make any sense. It's like it's at a fundamental level, the system that it's just crazy. It's just
highly pathological.
It's just like it's highly pathological, and it makes absolutely no sense, and it causes pain. So I think you're right. I think generosity is about trying to take care of the world as much as you can, and in a way that hopefully doesn't harm it more than when you started out.
I believe, I think it's very important, when I like me, I think it's very important you believe coming the shame, it's coming the shame. Because I feel if we have the energy inside the brain about, no, this is only bad, I think the optimist part is very important. It's difficult, I know it's difficult, but I think it's very important, you feel then going better, Because we are, I think, produce energy. And this energy going one part, I don't believe the energy where you move will disappear, I think this is transformation, I think if you dream about better world, it's possible one day.
It's infectious.
Like bacteria.
Yeah, exactly.
I have so much interest in this, and this is completely real. Hip hop, breakdance, okay? 80s. The b-boy. The b-boy make, his spin, one or two, the Thomas, Jeep. Today is a fucking crazy. The people almost, fly.
Yeah, talking about Olympics, let's talk about hip hop.
It's better the Olympics. The Olympics has a structure.
Yeah.
Hip hop is in the street, every people teaching the other, it's no, some structure, but in real is, and they change in almost 10 or 20 years, day a day, better and better and better. I think this is it's possible happen in every level, and every level, In tattoo, I tattoo for 15 years. I say, guys, I try don't only make what I like it, because if you're going to compete, the young generation is better and better and better and better and better. So some happens, I don't know why, but some genetic won't happen,
So yeah, it's like you can't just, you don't want to get in the way. you want to be part of changing it, making room. I think that's a great way of talking about generosity. It's making room. Yeah.
What's this?
Hacer espacio.
Making room. That this is making room for the other,
Yeah, because when you're selfish, it's like you only want everything for yourself, right? You're trying to take away space from others, right? And that's that's what capitalism is all about, right? It's this idea that you have to just keep on consuming or creating wealth, even though you have no idea how you're going to spend that wealth, right?
This constant acquisition of space.
And space.
It totally is that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Trying to take it all over.
Yeah.
But that will conclude the recorded portion. Oh, except I need to ask you to say your names and to let us know where we are.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Cheto Castellano. I'm an American Chilean. I don't know how to say about me, but I make different video, tattoo, I'm an art.
And you're in?
Huh?
You're in New York.
Yeah, I'm in New York.
I'm Lisette Olivares. I'm also sitting here in New York with Kalia. And what was the third thing we had to say?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great conversation.